Let's start with the word atonement. And let me give you a technical definition, and then I'm going to give you a definition in more layman's terms. Here's the technical definition. In other words, the strict or the more academic definition. If you're taking notes, I would write this down. Atonement, that aspect of the work of Christ, and particularly his suffering and death, which makes possible the restoration of fellowship between individual believers and God. Now, let me explain this term in more layman's terms, starting with the base word atone. Atone literally means at one, and it expresses the idea or concept of being reconciled after being estranged, alienated, or at enmity with someone. I want you to think of it like this. For whatever reason, something happened which caused a split in your relationship with the person. So now you're at enmity with that person. You're alienated and estranged with each other. In fact, if you got in the same room, it would be awkward. Do you say hi? Do you not say hi? Are you cold towards them or are you not cold towards them? But you know when you're in that room that it ain't happening. Now here's what's interesting. People like me, I'm oblivious to that. My wife can walk into a room and she can go, ooh. And she can actually pinpoint the two people that are in with each other. Not me. And usually I stick my foot in my mouth because of that. But I want you to imagine that someone's done something to you, and so now you're estranged from that person. You're in enmity with them. You're adversaries. And that's how we were people with God because of our sin. We were at enmity with God, alienated and estranged from him because of our sin. But the word atone means to reconcile or to bring us back together again. Something's been done that allowed us to reconcile. So now we're no longer separated into two adversarial sides. Instead, we're now on the same side. We're reconciled. We're at one with each other. We're not adversaries anymore. So things are good between us. Now we can be in the same room and we're happy. We're talking with each other. Things are good. Now, the word atonement means something a little bit different than the word atone. Yeah. Believe it or not, the suffix ment, M-E-N-T, changes the meaning just a little bit. You see, the suffix ment refers to the act of doing something or the means by which something is accomplished. So when you add the suffix ment to the base word atone, it means the act of making us at one with God, or the means by which we're made at one with God. So in layman's terms, atonement refers to all that Christ did in order to make us at one with God. Let me say that again because it's very important. If you're taking notes, write that down. Atonement refers to all that Christ did in order to make us at one with God. Or more specifically, it refers to Christ's suffering and death, which reconciled us to God. So, now that you know what atonement is, in layman's terms, let's look at the technical definition again. Notice what it is. Atonement, that aspect of the work of Christ, and particularly his suffering and death, which makes possible the restoration of fellowship. We're no longer at enmity with each other. We're no longer adversaries. But we now have restored fellowship with God. That's what atonement is. Makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it? Now, look at Leviticus chapter 17, verse number 11, and let's see how the word atonement is used in the Old Testament. Because we want to know how they had atonement in the Old Testament, and then we're going to find out how we achieve atonement in the New Testament. So look with me, if you would, at Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes an atonement for the soul. Now, notice what this is saying. The life of the flesh is in the blood. And people, that is so true. If you lose too much blood, you're going to die. because the blood provides the body's cells with oxygen, and it removes the carbon dioxide. It also transports nutrients and hormones. It regulates the body's temperature. It takes the body's waste products to the kidneys and liver, and the white blood cells protect the body from pathogens. And I could go on, but you get the picture. This is why an infection that gets in your blood or blood disease is so dangerous. It's because the life of the flesh is in the blood. And for that reason, blood represents life. Let me say that again, and you need to write that down because it's going to be on the test. All right? Blood represents life. Why? Because the life of the flesh is in the blood. Now, when Adam and Eve sinned, it separated them from the presence of God. It alienated them from God. Everyone with me? It created enmity between man and God, and Adam and Eve became estranged from God. Sin also brought forth death, not just for Adam and Eve, but for all men. Notice what Romans chapter 5, verse 12 says. When Adam sinned, it entered the world. Adam's sin brought death. So death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. So we're estranged from God because of sin, and the penalty for sin is death. So how can man be reconciled to God? In other words, what needs to be done for us to be reconciled with God? Well, according to Leviticus chapter 17, verse number 11, God allowed the Israelites to offer sacrificial animals as a penal substitution to atone for their souls. Now, let me say that again because that's very important. According to Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, God allowed the Israelites to offer sacrificial animals as a penal substitution to atone for their souls. In other words, God allowed sacrificial animals to bear their sin so that their punishment fell upon the animals rather than upon them. To put it simply, the sacrificial animals died in their place as a substitute so that they could be reconciled to God. That's what Leviticus chapter 17, verse number 11 is saying. Look at that verse again, one more time. Notice what it says. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it. What's it? The blood, the life of the animal, to you upon the altar. That's where sacrifices are made, on the altar. To make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes an atonement for the soul. That's the means by which we are reconciled to God. Blood upon the altar. The sacrificial animal's life for their life. People, that is penal substitution. The sacrificial animal's life for their life. So the sacrificial animals died in the Israelites' place so that they could be reconciled to God. Now, we know that the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin permanently. That's why Jesus Christ came. Notice what Hebrews chapter 10, verses 4 through 9 says. For it is not possible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. There it is. It's not possible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. That is why Christ came into the world. He said to God, you did not want animal sacrifices or sin offerings, but you have given me a body to offer. You were not pleased with burnt offerings or other offerings for sin. Then I said, look, I have come to do your will, O God, as is written about me in the scriptures. First, Christ said, you do not want animal sacrifices or sin offerings or burnt offerings or other offerings for sin, nor were you pleased with them, though they are required by the law of Moses. Then he said, look, I have come to do your will. He cancels the first covenant, which is what? The Mosaic covenant, in order to put the second covenant into effect. What's the second covenant? The new covenant. In fact, that's why we call it the New Testament. Testamentus means covenant. We are now under the new covenant that Jesus Christ established. The blood of bulls and goats could never take away sins permanently. That's why they were always offering them. You sin, you go in, you offer your sin offering, and before you even make it home, you've sinned again. You're in trouble. Deep doo-doo. But Jesus came because the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin permanently, so that he could offer himself. He's infinite. He's God. He can take away all sin for all times. So, the bottom line is this. Jesus did what the animals could not do. Let me say that again. Jesus did what the animals could not do. He paid for our sin once and for all. And he reconciled us to God so that we're no longer alienated from him. We're no longer estranged from him. We're no longer at enmity with him. So to recap, what does the word atonement mean? What does it refer to? Atonement refers to the work of Christ, and particularly his suffering and death, which makes possible the restoration of fellowship between individual believers and God. It's what Christ did in order to reconcile us with God, in particular his suffering and death.